Welcome to Order Militaris Radio TV, and we're lifelong Catholics, and what we do is all for free, and for our love of Jesus Christ, and for our Holy Mother, the Church, and we will defend our Holy Mother, the Church. Today we're going to get into great detail about the start of World War II in the Pacific with MacArthur, and so much great detail that if we would have had a studio built and all the bells and whistles and the fancy screens but beside us, behind us, we would be able to show you each and every place the Japanese invaded in the Pacific and where MacArthur was trying to defend in the Philippines. So the next time we do a program like this with details and names, places, if you want to see those right behind us, donate to our studio fundraiser. Welcome, Brother Alexis.
Thank you, AJ, for having me on Order Militaris Radio TV for this wonderful series on the life of Douglas MacArthur, one of the great American generals. And if he didn't have mishaps with politicians, he might have been one of the greatest American presidents. He and Patton really would have done wonderful things to keep America independent, sovereign nation. And we've discussed Patton already. And at the end of this series, we're going to talk about the problems MacArthur gave in and who his enemies were. But first, I want to thank the MacArthur Library in Norfolk, Virginia, where he's buried, for giving us permission to read from this wonderful book, The Reminiscences by General Douglas MacArthur. And if you have it at hand, AJ, you might be able to show it, yes. And all quoting small excerpt is full of information. And this is a book that I would strongly recommend all homeschoolers to require your boys in the final year of high school to read cover to cover. And get them a map of the Pacific and have them plot out all the places mentioned. They'd learn a lot of geography, to learn a lot of history, to learn a lot of character and the way this man thought. And MacArthur wasn't Catholic himself in Catholic countries, which says a lot about the man's nobility of soul. So in our previous episodes, we've talked about his life from birth all the way through the First World War and the interwar years, and the bonus on march on Washington. Now the Second World War is about to break out without a declaration of war. It's the day of infamy, 1941. So what happened on that day? And what day was it for MacArthur, and what day was it for the United States? This is an important point.
So for the United States, it was December 7th. But for MacArthur, when the attack happened, at 3:40 on a Sunday morning, December 8th, 1941, Manila time, a long-distance telephone call from Washington told me of the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor, but no details were given. It was our strongest military position in the Pacific. Its garrison was a mighty one, with America's best aircraft on strongly defended fields, adequate warning systems, anti-aircraft batteries backed up by our Pacific Fleet. My first impression was that the Japanese might well have suffered a serious setback. We had only one radar operator and had to rely for air warning largely on eye and ear. At 9:30 a.m., our reconnaissance planes reported a force of enemy bombers over Lingayen Gulf headed toward Manila. Major General Lewis H. Brereton, who had complete tactical control of the Far East Air Force, immediately ordered pursuit planes up to intercept them, but the enemy bombers veered off without contact. When the report reached me, I was still under the impression that the Japanese had suffered a setback at Pearl Harbor, and their failure to close in on me supported that belief. I therefore contemplated an air reconnaissance in the north using bombers for fighter protection. To ascertain a true estimate of the situation and to exploit any possible weakness that might develop on the enemy's front. While subsequent events quickly and decisively changed my mind, I learned to my astonishment that the Japanese had succeeded in their Hawaiian attack. And at 11:45, a report came in on an overpowering enemy formation closing in on Clark Field. Our fighters went up to meet them, but our bombers were slow in taking off, and our losses were heavy. Our force was simply too small to smash the odds against them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the American fleet and Air Force in Hawaii was devastated, decimated, you might say. Fortunately, most of the best ships, the aircraft carriers, were out on maneuvers. So you can see how much MacArthur was even thinking. They weren't going to risk giving any intel to MacArthur by undersea cable because they didn't know if the Japanese might already be in possession of the cable and hear what they're saying, and they didn't want the Japanese to know how successful the attack had been. That's something you don't want to reveal in a moment of battle, so you don't encourage the other side to be ferocious. So this must have come as a great shock to MacArthur. Did he make any comment on this unprovoked attack by the Empire of Japan on the United States?
No, he was kind of busy.
He was governor of Japan after the war and had very good relations with the post-war government of Japan. And so perhaps for a reason of diplomacy, he admitted that in his reminiscences, just for the sake of making peace. So what was the Japanese objective, and what did he do? Because he's an army
So,
and also
they had to get their planes up in the air, but the bombers are destroyed from the Japanese attack at the field there in Clark Field at Legain Gulf. So they were going to get the Rainbow Fives or the PBY seaplanes up to. They had to get eyes on because that's the only way they get information is from the air, since they don't have all the fancy technology that Pearl Harbor had but didn't use. So then he goes into it, provided that our supply lines, the sea lanes, should be kept open by the Navy, and our ground forces should hold out for from 4 to 6 months. The Pacific Fleet would then move in with massive force to escorting relieving ground troops. Navy, being unable to maintain our supply lines, deprived us of maintenance and munitions, the bombs and the fuels and other necessaries to operate our air arm. Our original supplies were meager and soon exhausted. This naval weakness enabled the enemy to establish a blockade of the Philippines, which, without other effort on Admiral King's part, would shortly render our air power helpless. The stroke at Pearl Harbor not only damaged our Pacific Fleet, but destroyed any possibility of future Philippine air power. Our sky defense died with our battleships in the waves off Ford Island. It canceled Rainbow 5 and sealed our doom. Although Admiral King felt that the fleet did not have sufficient resources to proceed to Manila, it was my impression that our Navy deprecated its own strengths and might well have cut through to relieve our hard-pressed forces. The Japanese blockade of the Philippines was to some extent a paper blockade. Mindanao was still accessible and firmly held by us. The bulk of the Japanese Navy, operating on the tight schedules, was headed south for the seizure of Borneo, Borneo, Malaya, Indonesia. American carriers having escaped destruction at Pearl Harbor could have approached the Philippines and unloaded planes on fields in Mindanao. The Navy fought the next 2 years and had great victories without any new ships. They had broken the Japanese code and knew the locations of their ships. There was a great reservoir of Allied naval power in the Atlantic Ocean and Mediterranean Sea. A serious naval effort might well have saved the Philippines and stopped the Japanese drive to the south and east, but one will never know.
Yeah, this was a big, you can see that he's a very fine strategic thinker. He knew that there were excess of forces in other parts of the world that could have been applied. And you can say he's criticizing the War Department for not having sufficiently supplied the Philippines to withstand a long attack. And for those who don't know the Philippine geography, the big island on which the capital Manila is, that's the one in the north, it's called the island of Luzon. And the big fat island at the bottom, which has all the tropical jungles, and you constantly hear reports today about terrorist attacks down there, because it's like half Muslim. That's Mindanao, and it's like an impenetrable jungle. It's kind of like the jungle of Borneo and Indonesia. So that would have been the strategy he pursued. But being a former chief of staff of the Department of War, his presence in the Philippines really helped a lot, but also made him a target. The Japanese were to capture him. They would know almost everything about what the American defense plans would be. They'd also know their code was broken. And that was the big advantage the Allies had in the Pacific. So what does MacArthur do to try to slow the capture of the Philippines?
So he goes into, like, the British let Singapore fall on February 15th, 1942. On December 10th, the Japanese began the ground offensive against Luzon. He was like, I was greatly concerned by the needs of the stricken civilian population, and President Roosevelt authorized me to make available 200 million pesos for relief purposes. I at once turned this amount over to the President Luzon. The second week of the war came to a close without the major attack for which I was holding my reserves in readiness. The pattern of the enemy's plans and direction at this main thrust were not yet revealed, except for a Japanese landing at Davao. In some force, no large-scale operation had taken place, and aerial activity still predominated. The enemy launched 12 major air raids during the week, but for the most part, damage was not serious and our casualties were light. Our Air Force sank 2 transports at Legazpi, and at Vigan destroyed 25 enemy planes which were caught on the ground. By December 21st, the ground fighting was growing in intensity. I kept a close watch on the low, sloping beaches of Ligayen Gulf, where I had stationed the 11th and 21st Division of the Philippine Army at beach defenses. In the deceptive quiet of the gray dawn of December 22nd, the great enemy blow fell at last. A huge invasion force entered Ligayen Gulf in 3 transport echelons. The first was composed of 27 transports from Takeo under the command of Rear Admiral Kinsaburo Hara. The second, 28 transports from Mako under Rear Admiral Yoji Nishimoto. The third of 21 transports from Keelung under Rear Admiral Suto Hirose. This force of 76 transports was supported by 3 escort units of cruisers, destroyers, and auxiliary aircraft. The troops conveyed were the 14th Army, commanded by Lieutenant General Masahiro Homa, comprising the 4th, 5th, 16th, 21st, 48th, 65th Division of the Japanese, implying a total strength of approximately 80,000 combat troops. This was about twice my own strength on Luzon.
They were pretty big transport ships. Each had 1,000 men on them. You can see the Japanese had listened to Mitchell's and learned how to use air power. They were way advanced of what the Americans knew how to combine it with land forces. And maybe they had even had some observers over in Europe the previous 2 years to see what the Germans were using, how the Germans were using air power.
And he was like, Japanese knew where to strike, street, location, and routes of the American main groupings were accurately plotted on their war maps. More than a year before their invasion, they had made extensive aerial surveys of northern Luzon, selecting the areas of strategic importance and the points they could best attack. The objective was the prompt and complete annihilation of the defending forces so as to clear without delay the way to the rich areas that lay to the south. Yep.
So once the Japanese were on land, what did MacArthur do?
So, on the 10, the main line of resistance would run from, Boron. What a name, Philippines.
Moran?
Yep. On the coast of the China Sea to Abu Kay on the shore of Manila Bay. If this line was reached, we could drop back to the reserve line with some 7 miles to the rear. A third line crossed the Marivalos Mountains, the highest part of the peninsula. Still further to the rear, Corregidor, separated from Bataan by 2 miles of water, would serve as a supply base for the Bataan defense and denied the Japanese to use Manila Harbor, even though they had the city of Manila itself. The imminent menace of the encirclement by greatly superior numbers forced me to act instantly. The problem was to sideslip my troops westward by a series of rapid maneuvers and holding actions to the Rocky Peninsula and Corregidor forts before their path would be cut off from the north. The crux of the problem was the successful passage of a famous tactical defile, the bridge at Columpit, just south of San Fernando, where the highway from northern Luzon to Manila joined the highway leading into Bataan. The movement of the southern Luzon force had to be through Manila, a difficult operation in itself. We had then to proceed along the highway to Columpit, cross the bridge, and pass through San Fernando before it would be safely on the road to Bataan. The lack of military transportation was solved by using commercial buses and motor vehicles, which were commandeered to speed up the movement of the Southern Luzon force. Day and night, endless columns of motor transportation moved goods, ammunition, equipment, and medical supplies from Manila to Bataan. Day and night, General Parker, acting as the guard, fended off the pressing enemy. Bataan itself was quickly organized for protracted defense, but the construction of depot areas in the forest west of Lanao, development of docks at Cabacabin, Limay, and Lanao, the construction of 2 general hospitals, and the improvement of the roads net, especially along the west coast. In the north, a designated line of defense across the central plain for delaying actions. Cautioning against possible envelopment and consequent destruction, General Wainwright quickly developed a pattern of defense to cause the maximum of delay to the enemy. He would hold long enough to force the Japanese to take time to deploy in full force. When he would slowly give way, leaving the engineers under General Cassie to dynamite bridges and construct roadblocks to bar the way. Again and again, these tactics would be repeated. Stand and fight, slip back, and dynamite. It was savage and bloody, but at one time.
Brilliant defense there. See that MacArthur learned something from the taxi man in Paris in the First World War. And Corregidor is this, the Corregidor Fortress is on a peninsula to the west of Manila. Manila Harbor is on the south. Luzon, the island Manila is mostly to the north. So they're skirting around in this direction down this peninsula, because that peninsula, the artillery at Corregidor was so naval artillery that they could prevent any ships entering that port. So owning Manila isn't the objective. You have to take Corregidor. And this will become the famous siege of Corregidor that lasts for months and installs the whole Japanese strategic plans for Southeast Asia, because Manila needs to be controlled as a supply depot. And for that to happen, to dislodge the American forces from Corregidor.
So let's pause here and let everybody sink in the information so far. So, as you know, we are founders of Order Militaris Catholicus. Everything we use, the websites and everything is paid by donations, membership donations. So, what are these donations, brother?
Okay, so we are a security initiative to defend Christians from persecution. We were founded in the 1st of August 2016 after news broke of Father Jacques Hamel having his throat slit by 2 Islamic terrorists in his parish church in northern France. And AJ and I have been running this, you call it an NGO, for 6 years. And no salary, and all the money raised either goes to expenses or to charitable donations to help charities overseas that are helping persecuted Christians. So we've helped the Christians in Mosul, in Lebanon, in Beirut, in Armenia, and we currently have a charity in the Ukraine, which is helping distribute medical supplies. But our whole organization is called Order Militaris Catholicus because we invite Catholics and Christians and people of goodwill want to defend Christians to join us in this work. And there's a lot of ways you could do that. But one of the simple and easiest ways is to pledge as a member. You can pledge as little as $8.50 a month. And we grant you an honorary status in the order as the layman. If you pledge more, you can be a squire or a herald or a knight or a baron or a duke. And those funds are membership subscription, where we have communities around the world. You are our invited guest if you're in the area, because you're a member of the order. And we use those funds to our expenses. That's mainly what we use them for. So that when we do a fundraiser, any expenses we have getting that money raised or getting it to the needy individuals is covered by our members' dues. And so we have a good number of members. We even have one family where there's 2 squires in the same family, mother and son. Her son wanted to be a member, and so she pledged along with him. But most people don't know that they can pledge as a member, and they don't know that this is a wonderful way to share in the good works of our organization. We are not a religious order. We conduct ourselves like a military order, although we are not a military order in the sense we haven't been established by any royalty. But I'm a Franciscan hermit, and AJ is related to the nobility of Europe. So we combine the religious, noble character in our founders, and we don't take a penny a salary, never have. We're a unique organization. We do a lot on social media, but we're not like all the others that buy $1 million homes and for their 8 or 12 kids, because neither AJ or I are married. Everything goes to helping Christians. And we do this for the love of Jesus Christ and Holy Mother Church, because there is no organization in the world for the defense of Christians. About there are some military orders still existing, but they've given up all security activity whatsoever. They're just beneficent organizations or, either medical care or care of churches and things of that side. So this is a unique organization. And if you see any of our programs on Ordo Militaris Radio TV, this is AJ's apostolate. Okay, it's not financially part of the order. It's something he does, but you can see the whole spirit of order and all the information and that he puts out and the programs he and I do. And we do this kind of to create publicity, because one of our biggest difficulties is that no one knows we exist, and we're pretty much black by all who are Catholic, but want people to donate money to them rather than to charity. So I would encourage you to become a pledging member, and AJ will put a link in the page. You go to ordo-militaris.us/donate, and you can see all the ways you can pledge as a member. And that's just one way you can help. We'll talk about other ways in the show. So this is why we cover famous generals like MacArthur, because you can practice a lot of virtues in the military profession. And so if you're Catholic and thinking of a military profession, call us, contact us. This is one we have yet to develop, but we definitely do want to develop. If there's a wealthy person out there, I'd like to find a Catholic military high school. We've got a whole idea and project for that, and contact us. So we left MacArthur in the Philippines. He's trying to fortify Corregidor, and he sees this as the decisive strategic point. Does he succeed in this?
No.
In fortify.
Yeah. So on Christmas Eve, I evacuated Manila, moving headquarters to Corregidor, and issued a proclamation on December 26, declaring Manila an open city. In order to spare the metropolitan area from ravages of attack either by air or ground, Manila is hereby declared an open city without the characteristics of a military objective. In order that no excuse may be given for a possible mistake, the American High Commissioner to the Commonwealth Government and all combatant military installations will be withdrawn from its environs as rapidly as possible. The municipal government will continue to function with its police force, reinforced by constable troops, so that normal protection of life and property may be preserved. Citizens are requested to maintain obedience to constituted authorities and continue the normal processes of business. Manila became the...
This is a wonderful announcement.
Yeah. Go ahead.
That saved lots of lives. The Japanese respect that.
Yep. So Manila, because of the previous evacuation of our forces, no longer had any practical military value. So the entrance to Manila Bay was completely covered by Corregidor and Bataan. As long as we held them, its use would be denied the enemy. You might have a bottle, but I had the cork. The Japanese had not expected that our forces would be withdrawn from Manila, intending to fight the decisive battle of the campaign for control of the city. The vast city attack on Pearl Harbor and subsequent thrust in Asia left only this one important obstacle in the path of the Japanese onslaught in the Southwest Pacific. Our tenacious defense against tremendous odds completely upset the Japanese military timetable, enabled the Allies to gain precious months for the organization of the defense of Australia and vital eastern areas of the Southwest Pacific. Bataan and Corregidor became a universal symbol of resistance against the Japanese and an inspiration to carry on the struggle until the Allies should fight their way back from New Guinea, Australia, liberate the Philippines, and thus press on to the Japanese homeland itself.
We have a modern analogy in Mariupol in the Ukraine, the heroic defense by not even 1,000 Marines, Ukrainian Marines, that held the Russian forces off for months. They just couldn't get rid of these people. until they decided to bomb the city off the face of the map and attempt to kill them. So, but Corregidor, it will live in history, and it is of immortal fame. MacArthur's brilliant mind chose the best and strongest point to defend in all of the Pacific. And he knew this would totally destroy the Japanese high command's plans, which it did, delayed by months. And you might say that the American defense of Corregidor saved the Australian people from Japanese occupation. They wouldn't have been able to resist, and it would have been horrific massacres that would have taken place. So a brilliant decision. He starts fortifying this. He was an engineer, so he's an expert in fortifications. Was he allowed to stay and complete his work?
So, he's now radioing Washington for supplies and everything. In response to the request, General Marshall radioed information advising every effort would be made to send air and troop replacements and reinforcements. But during the year-end conference in Washington, again reaffirmed the Allied Hitler First strategy, I received this message. It now appears that the plans for reaching you quickly with pursuit plane support are jeopardized. Your plans and orders are fully approved by the Secretary of War. My rank was raised to that of full general again, because it was lowered after the First World War. So, I could not but recall that Fort Selden march a half-century before, when the next watering hole was always about 10 miles away, and old Sergeant Ripley casually exploded, "Thank God, Captain, we're holding our own." On December 28th, I inaugurated guerrilla warfare in the central and southern groups of islands. At this time, despite my pleas to Washington, supplies and food and weapons were running dangerously low. General Marshall had promised to expend every effort to ensure the reinforcements would be sent, and it was upon this promise that I was able to sustain both the civilians and military. But nothing came. So then, let's see here. During this period, President Roosevelt expressed the doubt owed the people of the Philippines for their fight against the aggressor and pledged Allied efforts for the freedom and independence of the islands. On Corregidor, Manuel Quezon was sworn in for a second term as President of the Commonwealth. Since no significant naval efforts was forthcoming, I regrouped my forces on Bataan in two corps. The North Luzon Force now became the First Corps under General Wainwright and occupied the left perimeter. Second Corps, formerly South Luzon Force, under General Jones, came under the command of General Parker and held the right. The 4th Marine Regiment was under the control of the Navy, was not committed to heavy fighting on Bataan, being held in reserve for the actual defense of Corregidor itself. Fighting became heavy along the entire front and attacks by enemy bombers almost ceaseless. My anti-aircraft ammunition began to dwindle alarmingly, and I was forced to reduce this type of firing to little more than a token effort and occasional bursts for purposes of deception. The water system and mains on Corregidor and our adjacent fortified islands were practically destroyed, and I had to initiate rationing. It was apparent that the enemy was setting up a prepared attack in maximum strength. On January 10th, I received the following epistle. To General Douglas MacArthur, Commander-in-Chief, U.S. Army Forces in the Far East. Sir, you are well aware that you are doomed. The end is near. The question is how long you will be able to resist. You have already cut rations by half. I appreciate the fighting spirit of yourself and your troops who have been fighting with courage. Your prestige and honor have been upheld. However, in order to avoid needless bloodshed and to save the remnants of your divisions and your auxiliary troops, you are advised to surrender. In the meantime, we shall continue our offensive, as I do not wish to give you time for defense. If you decide to comply with our advice, send a mission as soon as possible to our front lines. We shall then cease fire and negotiate an armistice. Failing that, our offensive will be continued with an inexorable force which will bring upon you only disaster. Hoping your wise counsel will so prevail that you will save the lives of your troops. I remain, yours very sincerely, Commander-in-Chief, Japanese Expeditionary Force.
Yeah, the Japanese would kill everyone who surrendered, basically. You can see how intimidated they are, though. They wanting them to surrender.
Yeah.
What MacArthur's response?
So now he's getting letters, from FDR, the King of England, Secretary of War, saying, "Oh, great job holding everything together in Busan, but we're sorry we can't say nothing to help you."
Wonderful, encouraging letters.
So everything is, they're just getting bombed by day, bombed by night. The fortresses are just falling apart.
It was this time that Roosevelt ordered him to evacuate?
Yeah. So around this time, he is now getting messages from the War Department saying to protect you, to defend you and your family, you need to evacuate from Manila into trying to get yourself to Australia. He's like, well, since it doesn't, in the movie MacArthur with Gregory Peck, he's like, well, since it doesn't have the signature of the president on it, I'm not going to listen to it.
Is a great man who knows when he's being commanded and when he's not being commanded. This is a lesson every Catholic should learn, and not to obey things when you're not being commanded,
And go back to the scene in Washington, sir, he will not leave unless it's a presidential order. And FDR was like, okay, put my name to it.
And he wanted the president to take, because if a general should surrender his fortress or evacuate without a presidential command, it will be a blot on his record and he'll never be promoted again. So he was pretty wise. We mentioned this before. There's a lot of infighting in the War Department, even in the Department of Defense today. Some generals want to be promoted over others, and they're out to ruin people's career by giving them bad advice. Because this is where the brilliance of a great man triumphs over all deception. So, on what day did he receive this command? What was his reaction? Did he want to leave the Philippines?
He was like, I have never disobeyed an order by the president, but I am about to do so. I shall resign my commission as an officer, re-enlist as a private, and stay and fight. But then everybody's like, the president is ordering you to get your butt on a boat and get out of here. Like, okay.
Did he evacuate with his family?
Yeah.
His wife and son, I think?
Nope. So, now this is his evacuation. I sent for General Wainwright, who was to be left in command, to tell him goodbye. He had been a plebe at West Point when I was first classman, and later became first captain of the class of 1906. A fine soldierly figure. He had already done wonders in the campaign and was popular with both officer and men. Jim, I told him, hold on till I come back for you. I was to come back, but it would be too late. Too late for those battling men in the foxholes of Bataan. Too late for the valiant gunners at the batteries of Corregidor. Too late for Jim Wainwright. It was on 7:15 on the evening of March 11th when I walked across the porch to my wife, Jean. I said gently, "It is time to go." We drove in silence to the south dock where Buckley and the PT-41 were waiting. The rest of the party was already aboard. Shelling of the waterfront had continued intermittently all day. I put Jean, Arthur, and Ah Shu on board, and then turned slowly to look back. On the dock, I could see the men staring at me. I had lost 25 pounds living on the same diet as the soldiers. I must have looked gaunt and ghastly sitting there in my old war-stained clothes. No, no bed-metal commander of inspiring presence. What a change had taken place in that once beautiful spot. My eyes roamed that warped and twisted face of scorched rock. Gone was the vivid green foliage with its trees, shrubs, and flowers. Gone were the buildings, the sheds, the ever-growing thing. The hail of relentless bombardment had devastated, buried, and blasted. Ugly dark scars marked smoldering paths where the fire had raged from one end of the island to the other. Great gaps and forbidding crevices still belched their tongues of flame. The desperate scene showed only a black mass of destruction. Through the shattered ruins, my eyes sought topside, where the deep roar of the heavy guns still growled defiance, with the red blast tearing the growing darkness asunder. Up there in the command was my classmate, Paul Bunker. 40 years had passed since Bunker had been twice selected by Walter Camp for the All-American team. I could shut my eyes and see again the blond head racing, tearing, plunging, 210 pounds of irresistible power. I could almost hear quarterback Charlie Daly's shrill voice barking, "Bunker back." He and many others up there were old friends, bound by ties of deepest comradeship. Darkness had now fallen, and the waters were beginning to ripple from the faint night breeze. The enemy firing had ceased, and the muttering silence had fallen. It was as though the dead were passing by the stench of destruction. The smell of filth thickened the night air. I raised my cap in farewell salute, and I could feel my face go white, feel a sudden convulsion twitch in the muscles of my face. I heard someone ask, "What's his chance, Sarge, of getting through?" And the gruff reply, "Dunno. He's lucky. Maybe 1 in 5. I stepped aboard PT-41. "You may cast off, Buck," I said, "when you're ready." Although the flotilla consisted of only 4 battle-scarred PT boats, its size was no gauge of uniqueness of its mission. This was the desperate attempt by a commander-in-chief and his key staff to move thousands of miles through enemy lines to another war theater, to direct a new and intensified assault. Nor did the Japanese themselves underestimate the significance of such a movement. Tokyo Rose had announced gleefully that if captured, I would be publicly hanged on the Imperial Plaza in Tokyo, where the Imperial Towers overlooked the traditional parade ground of the Emperor's Guard divisions. Little did I dream that bleak night that 5 years later, at the first parade review on occupation troops, I would take the salute as Supreme Commander for the Allied Powers, on the precise spot so dramatically predicted for my execution.
And so with these 4 PT boats, I guess they were loaded with tons of fuel, they make their way to what? All the way to Australia? Do they stop and refuel anywhere? That's absolutely amazing, because that must be like 2,000 miles.
So,
They didn't yet have good naval radar, so that's the way they could get through without being detected by the Japanese Imperial fleet. But it's an amazing getaway. And here we see the providence in the MacArthur family. Remember, we talked about his father who was in the Civil War and didn't get shot until like the last moment. And even in the First World War, he went up to the front and he was not hit by a bullet, really. So he had a special providence watching over him.
So, the tiny convoy met at Turning Buoy just outside the minefield at 8 p.m. Then we roared through in single file, Buckley leading and Admiral Rockwell and PT-34 closing the formation. On the run to Cabrera Island, many white lights were sighted. The enemy signaled that a break was being attempted through the blockade. The noise of our engines had been heard, but the sound of a PT engine is hard to differentiate from that of a bomber, and they evidently mistook it. Several boats passed, the sea rose and began to get rough. Spiteful waves slapped and slapped at the thin skin of the little boats. Visibility was becoming poorer. As we began closing on Japanese blockading fleet, the suspense grew tense. Suddenly there were sinister outlines against curiously peaceful formations of lazily drifting cloud. We waited, hardly breathing, for the first burst of shell that would summon us to identify ourselves. 10 seconds, 20, a full minute, no gun spoke. The PT rode so low in the choppy seas that they had not spotted us. Buckley changed at once to a course that brought us to the west and north off the enemy craft, and we slid by in the darkness, and again. This was to be repeated during the night, but our luck held. The weather deteriorated steadily, and towering waves buffeted our tiny, war-weary, blacked out vessels. The flying spray drove against our skin like stinging pellets of birdshot. We would fall off into a trough, then climb up on the rear slope of a steep water peak, only to slide down the other side. The boat would toss crazily back and forth, seeming to hang free in space, as though about to breach. Then it would break away and go forward with a rush. I recall describing the experience afterward as what it must be like to take a trip in a concrete mixer. The four PTs could no longer keep formation. By 3:30 a.m., the convoy had scattered. Buckley tried for several hours to collect the others, but without success. Now each skipper was on his own, his rendezvous just off the uninhabited Kyoyo Islands.
Yeah, in high seas, a small boat has to go right into the wave. It goes parallel with the wave. The wave will inundate it, flip it upside down, and it will submerge. But it's a very difficult affair in a small boat when the storms get too high. So this was like, just, this is an heroic escape that goes down in the history books. And I don't know if they ever made a Life of MacArthur on film, but this would be an absolutely dramatic moment to show. And I assume his family and his children were down below deck. And but he had the courage to stand up there, which was really risky because you'd be washed away by anything. But he was no coward, MacArthur. He didn't. He looked danger in the face, and this shows you what a great man he was. And he knew he had to do that to keep morale of his men going.
So let us pause here, and now we also offer patches that you can buy for, what was it, $10?
$10. Yeah, we have a whole bunch of different Crusader patches. They say Deusful on them. And AJ's holding the embroidered red patch and it has Velcro on the back. So you stick it to a Velcro, a piece of clothing already has Velcro on it. And
we also have our heavy-duty cross-desert patches, also with a Velcro on the back of it.
Yeah, so this is the patch for our Orders charitable efforts in the Ukraine. And on the website, you can see our other patches. We have one of St. Michael the Archangel, who is the patron protector of the Ukrainian army and also of Catholics everywhere. And it's a beautiful embroidered patch in the shape of a cross. And each of those for $10. And we only have a limited supply. There's only like 4 or 5 of each one or something of that sort. But we've been offering them since September, and I think we've only sold 3 or 4, so you still have your chance to get one. And if you have like a jacket, a leather jacket, or a military green jacket, or you know, a jacket you put patches on, you want to have that unique patch that no one else has. If you have a son that likes putting patches and riding a motorcycle, give him at least a Christian patch to wear. And that's what these are for. And they're only $10, and you can order them on the website at ordo-militaris.us/shop. Or you can see them on the front page when you're on it. And that's a little way you can help. It's more a way we kind of promote the morale. They're called morale patches because they're supposed to encourage your morale in what you're doing. And wear them with honor and only doing honorable things, of course. And please share this video. And we do a lot of videos on Militaris Radio TV, but not many people share them. And we can reach a lot more people if you share our videos, if you share the programs AJ does, and if you share even links to the website or the patches or the other merchandise we sell. That will help us a lot, because it's in vain if we do all that we do and that everyone watches us neither reacts to our appeals nor shares what we have. So this is another great way that you can help. And if you can't afford buying merchandise, you can at least share information about it, encourage others to get it. And that you can do without any money if you have some spare time and internet access. So MacArthur doesn't flee the Philippines to disappear from the war. In fact, he takes on a very important role. And what is it, AJ?
So they get him to Australia, where they promised him everything, infantry, Air Force, Navy. Then they would resupply, regroup, and head back to the Philippines really quick. But when MacArthur got to Australia, there was none of that. He was like, oh, crud.
Australia at the time, you got to remember, it's a whole continent. But I think at the time it didn't have more than like 5 million people, maybe even 3 million people, which is less than the people in New York City. So, we're talking about frontier, there's not much what you could do until America could supply it through the South Pacific. And with the Japanese overrunning Singapore, Indonesia, Indochina, and even Burma, it was the British to supply Australia. It was very difficult and very risky. So he basically had to build up defense from scratch, didn't he?
Yeah, he had to build the infantry from scratch. He had to build up the Air Force from scratch. He had to rely on advisors to build up a Navy from scratch. And, well, then you go back to the Philippines right away. Because nearby on New Guinea, Japan took up residence over there.
Yeah, New Guinea's right to the northern border of Australia. Now, what was MacArthur's role in Australia? Did he actually have command of the Australian Armed Forces, or was he just like an advisor?
He was pretty much commander of it all, but he relied on the Australian officers and generals to help lead the Australians, but he pretty much led the American forces there. And when the fight for New Guinea started, it was a disaster, bloody mess.
Okay, we can cover that in our next program because that's a really important campaign, and we'll see MacArthur's brilliance in it. And if you like the program on MacArthur that we've done today, you know, we've already done several episodes and we're going to be doing some more. So this is going to be a wonderful educational series you can use in homeschooling, you can share with friends, especially if you're a war gamer and you have a game about the Pacific in the Second World War. This is something that gives you a lot of background information. If you would like to support Ordo Militaris Catholicus in our work around the world, the merchandise we sell that's most popular is our Lepanto flag. I have one hanging here. The ones we have for sale are identical to this, except that this one was made with the hold on the slide onto a pole, and the ones we're selling now have eyelets that you can tie to a flagpole. And it's a rather large flag. I think it's like nearly 6 feet long. It's a historic replica of the flag of Our Lady of Victories, which was flown by the Holy League at the Battle of Lepanto on October 7th, 1571. And because of that battle, the Pope established the Feast of Our Lady of Victories, which is now called the Feast of Our Lady of Rosary. And it features the cross of Christ and the 4 Catholic powers that formed the Holy League Alliance, that of Venice, that of the papacy, that of Austria, and that of Spain. And it actually has the code to the battle plan on the flag. I think we did a show on Lepanto that we explain that. And it's a wonderful thing to fly on your boat or fly from your house. Or if you want to be that unique teenager in town, you hang it in your room and have something that no one else even has or where they can get to. We are the only organization that manufactures and sells historical reproduction of a battle flag from the Battle of Lepanto. And all the funds raised go to our humanitarian work to help persecuted Christians around the world. So it's not only a way to show your love for Catholic history, because at Lepanto, that Catholics defended Western civilization from Ottoman aggression. And you can actually say that we Catholics saved Europe on that day. And in addition, the funds raised, the flag is $125 for a donation, go to a worthy cause. So it's printed on polyester, and it's light resistant and it's water resistant, and it has trimmed edge and has a very good border, the one we're currently selling. So if you want to add gold tassels to carry it in a procession for Our Lady of the Rosary, or if you have a side chapel to Our Lady of the Rosary or Victories in your parish, this is the flag that hang in your side chapel. You might want to get 2 or 3 and get one and show it to your pastor. Be like, oh, this is the best thing to put out, because people should understand what Our Lady's devotion of Our Lady Rosary is about. Yes, it is about getting graces from Our Lady, but it's first of all for the defense of Christendom. So.
Yep. So we'll have all the links for how to become a member, patches and flags. So please do purchase a patch, or become a member, or you can really do something wonderful. You get a flag and help persecuted Christians.
And if you want to buy stock, or Montana Corporation is a stock corporation, and there's a whole bunch of projects we'd like to do. And you can give me a call at our number 406-299-9260. That's in the United States, but it rings on my phone anywhere I am in the world. And I can talk to you about our investments for those who are more blessed by divine providence and want to do some really great things to defend Christianity. Thank you, AJ, for having me on this episode of MacArthur. Our next episode on MacArthur, we're going to cover his drive towards
back to his fight in New Guinea, which then will be his drive right back to the Philippines.
Okay, and then what? The third one will be his occupation of Japan, where MacArthur shows he's one of the great statesmen of world history.
Yep. This is Ordo Militaris Radio TV signing off. Deus Volt.
Deus Volt.